August 13th, the press office of the Holy See published what looked like a routine appointment. 3 historians were named to the Pontifical Committee for Historical Sciences, the body that advises the Secretariat of State and the dicasteries of the Roman Curia on matters of history. One of those 3 names is Umberto Longo, professor of medieval history at La Sapienza, director of the Italian Historical Institute for the Middle Ages. On paper, an impeccable resume. Nobody serious disputes his credentials as a medievalist. And now, here is where this stops being a routine appointment story. This is not a screenshot passed around on a blog. It is a PDF hosted on the official website of the Scottish Rite of Italy, a bulletin called Logos, downloadable right now, and on page 5 of one of its issues there is a list. Officers for the year 2013 of a Lodge of Perfection in Rome called Secret Masters. Among those officers, listed by full name, Brother Orator Umberto Longo, 4th degree. Orator is not a guest who wandered in. It is one of the officers who runs the lodge. And in the following issue of that same bulletin, the same name signs again, no longer at the 4th degree, but at the 9th. Today we are going to lay these documents on the table one at a time, and we are going to say, with the same clarity, exactly what they prove and exactly what they do not prove, in order, so that by the end you leave this video able to separate the fact from the noise around it. First, the timeline of what actually happened this week. On August 13th, 2026, the Holy See's official bulletin published, in its section on resignations and appointments, that the Holy Father had named 3 professors to the Pontifical Committee for Historical Sciences. Umberto Longo of Italy, Francesco Cesario of the United States, and Jana Baranska of Poland. This is not a leak. It sits on the Vatican's own press page, dated, numbered, and it was picked up by Vatican News, L'Osservatore Romano, and Catholic wire services across half the world. Then, on August 14th, the American outlet LifeSite News published a report stating that Umberto Longo appears repeatedly in Masonic records. And third, this channel went through those underlying documents page by page, and what is in them is not a vague appearance. It is a title, a degree, a named lodge, and a documented progression of rank within a single year. Before we go further, it is worth reading the actual statute that governs this pontifical committee, because it is the thing that turns this from a curiosity into a real question. The committee's statute, approved in Vatican City on September 3, 2019, states in Article 5 that its members are to be chosen from among Catholic historians who are highly qualified on the scientific plane, not distinguished historians. Not respected experts, Catholic historians. The same article specifies that members are appointed by the Pope on the proposal of the committee's president. Hold on to that detail, because it becomes decisive by the end of this story. Article 2 states that the committee operates under the guidance of the Supreme Pontiff's Magisterium, offers qualified historical counsel to the Secretariat of State and to the dicasteries of the Roman Curia, and works alongside the Vatican Archive, today called the Apostolic Archive, and the Vatican Apostolic Library. In plain terms, this is a body of people sitting at the table where the Church decides how its own history gets told, with institutional access to the Pope's own archives. So the question is not whether Longo is a competent medievalist. The question is whether the requirement the Vatican itself put in writing was actually verified before this appointment was made. Now, 4 stops, in chronological order, and at each one, the source and where it is hosted, so that nobody has to take this channel's word for it. Stop 1, 2013, the full name and the office. The bulletin is called Logos, hosted on the official website of the Scottish Rite of Italy. Page 5 carries the header Lodge of Perfection, Secret Masters, Rome East, Officers for the year 2013. Third on that list, after the Worshipful Master at the 33rd degree and the Very Reverend at the 30th, sits Brother Orator Humberto Longo, 4th degree. Brother there does not mean a religious title. It is the standard Masonic form of address. Orator is one of the lodge's ranking officers. In that same issue, Longo signs 2 pieces, one of them titled The History of the Scottish Rite, Ancient and Accepted. Stop 2. And this is where the language shifts from someone studying a subject to someone speaking from inside it. The following issue of that same bulletin, on the same official website, carries a new signature, an agape address from 2013 by Brother Orator U. Longo, now at the 9th degree, titled The Dynamic Path of Perfection of the Scottish Knights, Tradition and Ritual, Regeneration and Universality. Both texts fall within the same calendar year, 2013. The second one is dated from Rome, July 3, 2013, and appears in the very next issue after the first. He no longer signs it at the 4th degree, he signs it at the 9th. And notice how he writes, because this is the detail that actually matters here. He does not write like someone studying a phenomenon from the outside looking in. He writes from inside it, in the first person plural, addressing Scottish knights, masons, companions, and apprentices directly. He speaks of our tradition, of the rite we are preparing to carry out together, of Masonic rituals as profound anchors of wisdom, and of the instruments that Freemasonry places at our disposal. And here this channel wants to be scrupulously honest, because that honesty is the entire point of doing this work at all. An academic can write about Freemasonry without being a Freemason. That happens every day, and there is nothing wrong with it. What an outside academic does not typically do is sign as brother at a specific degree, while listed among the officers of a named lodge, addressing those present as us. That is where the documented record from 2013 stands, on its own, without embellishment. A named office, a specific degree, a specific lodge, and a rise in rank inside a single calendar year. What it does not yet tell us is whether the man who signed those pages in 2013 is the same man the Pope named to his historical committee 13 years later, and whether whatever happened between those 2 dates matters as much as the gap itself. That is where part 2 of this story picks up, because the paper trail does not stop in 2013. It continues, and it eventually reaches all the way to a stage in Rome where the man now identified as a professor at La Sapienza is introduced by title and closed out by the single highest-ranking Freemason in the country. Stop 3 takes us to 2014, and this is the piece that closes the identification, the one detail that answers the objection anyone watching this is already forming in their mind. Longo is a common surname in Italy. What if this is simply a namesake? 2 different men who happen to share a last name and nothing else? That is a fair question to ask, and it deserves a real answer rather than a dismissal. So let us check it directly. Document against document. On the official website of the Grande Oriente d'Italia, the country's principal Masonic obedience, and by far its largest, there is an announcement for a Scottish Rite lecture cycle, dated July 9, 2014, held in the Doria Hall of the Sheraton Hotel in Rome. This is not an obscure regional gathering. It is a formal lecture series hosted under the banner of the National Grand Orient itself. The listed speaker is Humberto Longo. The title of his lecture is The Dynamic Path of Perfection of the Scottish Knights, Tradition and Ritual, regeneration and universality. Word for word, the exact same title that Brother Hugh Longo, 9th degree, had signed in the Scottish Rite Bulletin the year before, in that Agape address dated from Rome, July 3, 2013. Not a similar title, not a paraphrase. The identical wording, repeated a year later, now under the sponsorship of Italy's largest Masonic body rather than a single lodge's internal bulletin. That is no longer a coincidence of surnames. Coincidences do not reproduce another man's essay title verbatim and deliver it as a public lecture. That is the same man giving the same lecture under the same title, now speaking under a national rather than a local banner. Stop 4 brings us to 2022, and this is where La Sapienza enters the record directly, closing the final gap between the man in these Masonic bulletins and the professor the Pope named yesterday. In December of that year, there was an event titled Hugo Pratt, Venice, and the Initiatory Universe of Corto Maltese, held under the sponsorship of the Scottish Masonic Foundation Tribenetum. The program for that event is public and remains available. There, the speaker no longer appears simply by name, the way he did in 2014. He is listed with his full academic title, Professor Humberto Longo, full professor of medieval history, La Sapienza, University of Rome. That is the exact university, the exact discipline, and by extension, the exact man the Vatican Bulletin refers to when it names its newest committee member. Now, to be precise here, because precision is the entire discipline this channel tries to hold itself to, the Vatican's own bulletin does not actually identify Longo through his position at La Sapienza. It identifies him through his other title, Director of the Italian Historical Institute for the Middle Ages. Two different titles, two different institutional affiliations, but one and the same man. The Institute's own official biography, published on its own website, states that Humberto Longo was born in Rome in 1967 and holds the chair in medieval history at La Sapienza. That is, the exact same position listed on that 2022 Masonic-sponsored program. Same man, same chair, same university, confirmed by the Institute's own words about its own director. And who delivered the closing remarks at that 2022 event? A man identified in the program itself as Dr. Gianpaolo Barbi, Sovereign Grand Commander of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite in Italy. Not a regional officer, not a lodge secretary, the single highest-ranking authority of the Scottish Rite in the entire country, closing an event at which the future Pontifical Committee member was one of the featured speakers. The chain closes itself at that point, and it closes cleanly. The brother orator of a Rome lodge in 2013, the identical lecture title delivered under the Grande Oriente d'Italia banner in 2014, the La Sapienza professorship confirmed by name in 2022, and the appointment to the Pope's own historical committee made yesterday. 4 separate documents, 4 separate years, one continuous identity running through all of them. Now, the question everyone watching this is actually asking by this point: why does any of this matter so much? Why should a decade-old lodge membership matter more than a man's current academic standing? Because a great many Catholics today have quietly assumed that the Church's historic concern about Freemasonry is a 19th century anxiety, something that belonged to an older, more suspicious era of the Church, and has since been retired without much comment. It has not been retired. It has never been retired. 3 dates make that unmistakably clear, and it is worth walking through all 3 slowly, because together they span nearly 2.5 centuries of consistent teaching. First, April 20th, 1884. Pope Leo XIV signs the encyclical Humanum Genus, and he does not soften the language anywhere in it. He divides humanity into two camps: the kingdom of God on earth, which is the true church of Jesus Christ, and the kingdom of Satan. And he places what he explicitly calls the Masonic sect within that second camp, describing it as working openly and publicly for the ruin of the church. He also notes, and this detail is often lost, that 7 popes before him had already condemned Freemasonry by name, stretching back to Clement XII in 1738. Leo XIV was not inventing a new concern. He was restating a concern the papacy had already held consistently for nearly a century and a half before he ever put pen to paper. Second, November 26, 1983. This date matters because it addresses a very specific and very common misunderstanding. Many Catholics at the time assumed that the newly promulgated Code of Canon Law, by not naming Freemasonry explicitly the way the old 1917 Code had quietly lifted the old prohibition altogether. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith addressed that assumption directly in a declaration signed personally by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, then serving as prefect of that congregation, and formally approved by Pope John Paul II. The declaration states plainly that the Church's negative judgment regarding Masonic associations remains unchanged, because Masonic principles have always been considered irreconcilable with Catholic doctrine, and that a Catholic who formally and knowingly joins a Masonic lodge is in a state of grave sin and may not approach Holy Communion. That is not an ambiguous statement. It is about as direct as ecclesiastical language gets. Third, and this is the date that matters most for anyone tempted to think this is simply an old debate that modern churchmen quietly no longer take seriously. November 13th, 2023, less than 3 years ago. The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, responding to a formal question from a bishop in the Philippines, under the signature of Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez and with the explicit approval of Pope Francis, restated once again that active membership in Freemasonry by the Catholic faithful remains prohibited due to what the response calls the irreconcilability between Catholic doctrine and Freemasonry. 7 popes condemned it before Leo XIV. Leo XIV himself makes 8, nearly 300 years of consistent condemnation, and the most recent reaffirmation of that same teaching is under 3 years old, issued by the current pontificate's own doctrinal office. This is not an antique concern gathering dust in a drawer somewhere in the Vatican archives. It is current, active, binding doctrine, restated well within living memory. Now, the part other channels covering this story are likely to skip entirely because it complicates a clean, simple narrative, and the part that will make this video hold up well after this news cycle has passed, while theirs quietly ages badly. What these documents do not prove, and this channel wants to be just as clear about this as it was about everything that came before it, these documents do not prove that Humberto Longo is a practicing, active Freemason today, in August of 2026. The strongest documentation available, the named office and the specific 9th degree rank, dates entirely to 2013. In 2022, he still appears at an event connected to that same Masonic world, sponsored by a Scottish Masonic foundation. But presence as an invited academic speaker at an event is simply not the same thing as an active, formal, currently maintained affiliation. A historian can be invited to speak at a Masonic-sponsored cultural event about Hugo Pratt and Corto Maltese, without that invitation itself proving ongoing membership. And here is a detail that genuinely cuts in Longo's favor, and this channel is not going to leave it out simply because it complicates the story. In that same lodge's own list of officers for the year 2014, Humberto Longo no longer appears at all. Whatever role he held in 2013 at the 4th and then the 9th degree, by the very next year's officer list, his name is simply absent. Nor has this channel, in going through everything publicly available, found any statement by him that is anti-Catholic in any way, nothing directed against the Pope, against the sacraments, or against a single point of Catholic doctrine, and nothing here is going to be invented or implied to fill that particular gap, just to make the story more dramatic. But there is also, and this is the other half of the honest picture, no public statement from him renouncing Freemasonry, no denial of the documents that exist, no retraction of anything he wrote or signed in 2013, and no confirmation either way about his current status. What exists, stated as plainly as this channel can state it, is a documented Masonic past, with a name, an office, and a rising degree attached to it, and an unexplained present that nobody in a position of authority has addressed. That is precisely why this video does not end with an accusation. Choose a voice that resonates with you in 5 minutes, if it chose to. First, is the professor named yesterday to the Pontifical Committee the same Brother Humberto Longo, 9th degree, who signed those Scottish Rite bulletins in 2013? If the answer is no, then say so publicly, and this entire matter closes today, cleanly, with no lingering doubt. Second, if he is in fact the same man, when did he leave Freemasonry, and how was that departure documented? Third, was there any formal reconciliation with the Church, of the specific kind that doctrine requires of anyone who has belonged to a Masonic lodge and wishes to return fully to communion? Fourth, was the requirement laid out in Article 5 of the committee's own statute that its members be Catholic historians, actually verified through any process before this name was sent forward for the Pope's signature? And fifth, the question that matters most of all in this entire story: did anyone in the Curia know about any of this before the Holy Father signed the appointment? Because none of these underlying documents were ever hidden, they have sat in the open, on the Scottish Rite's own official website, one click away from anyone who cared to look, for well over a decade now. There are only 2 possible answers to that last question, and neither one is remotely comfortable for the institution involved. Either nobody actually checked, which points toward a serious and troubling failure of basic vetting somewhere inside the Curia's appointment process, or somebody did check and the appointment moved forward regardless of what that check turned up. Let this channel close with the one detail that stands out above everything else covered today, and it sits right on the very first page of the committee's own governing statute. This body was not invented out of nothing in 1954, the year of its formal modern founding. It descends directly from a cardinalatial commission for historical studies that was established by Pope Leo XIV himself on August 18, 1883, founded on a conviction that the statute still quotes word for word today, that historical facts, examined without prejudice, defend the Church and the papacy by themselves, spontaneously and magnificently. That same Pope Leo XIV, only 8 months later, signed Humanum Genus, the most solemn and forceful condemnation of Freemasonry in the entire history of the Church. Both documents came from the very same pen, 8 months apart, from the very same pontiff. And yesterday, 142 years after that, a pope who deliberately chose to take the name Leo XIV signed an appointment to that very same historical body his predecessor founded. Listen carefully to this final point, because nobody should walk away from this video with a poisoned or bitter heart over any of it. This channel is not saying the Pope personally knew any of this. The statute is explicit on this point. Members are named on the proposal of the committee's own president, not selected personally by the pontiff from a list of candidates he has independently vetted. The Pope signs what is placed in front of him for signature, and dozens upon dozens of appointments cross his desk every single day, appointments he simply cannot personally investigate one by one down to this level of archival detail. Somebody, somewhere in that process, should have checked this before it ever reached his desk, and that somebody was clearly not the Pope himself. So the request from this channel today is a simple and a respectful one. Let the Holy See clarify this with 3 plain lines of text. Not against Longo, who has every right in the world to his good name and to explain himself fully if he chooses to. And if he does offer that explanation, this channel will publish it with exactly the same weight and the same reach it has given this story today, without exception. This request is made for the ordinary Catholics out there who have spent 300 years hearing, consistently and repeatedly, that Freemasonry is incompatible with the Catholic faith, and who woke up yesterday morning to this particular piece of news sitting in their feed. And one more thing, the most important thing said in this entire video: do not lose your peace over this. The Church has survived far worse than one troubling appointment across 2,000 years of her history. Pray for the Pope, which costs the least of anything asked of you today, and is needed the most. And pray for Professor Longo as well, a soul that Christ died for just as certainly as any other. This channel discusses documents. It does not condemn people, and it never will. What do you think? Should the Vatican reverse this appointment outright, or wait for Humberto Longo to offer his own explanation first? Leave your answer down in the comments below, and while you're there, tell this channel which of these 5 questions you most want the Holy See to actually answer. God bless you.